Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jane Omojokun, and my presentation is on standards and regulations, critical success factor for economic competitiveness. And that's my presentation outline. The first one is planned support for agro-business, then standards and regulations, the cold chain system, then actions to consider. I think we all know, but for emphasis, that's what PLAN does: advocacy, knowledge and research, standards and regulations, agribusiness and technology, and finance. They've been doing quite a bit. I didn't know they had done so much till I listened to all the presentations earlier. And we congratulate them for all they've done, especially in the area of cold chain. They've been supporting agribusiness in developing countries to modify their practices and upgrade their systems to reduce the perishability of nutritious foods from farm gate to consumption. Here in Nigeria, we have a lot of issues at the farm gate, and that's why they're helping us doing the B2B and connecting people to upgrade our systems. They're partnering with the Global Cold Chain Alliance, and they've done some technical assistance for Nigerians. Of course, we have seen the effectiveness of the B2B meetings we had earlier. People have been connected. That's a schematic on it. It brings together the local businesses, the industry leaders, technical experts from the Alliance, and technical experts from the cold chain, packaging and crating and processing industries to increase local access to knowledge, technologies and financial services. They've done that very effectively today. In 2017, which is this year, they're hosting 2 global expert consultations and on best practices for lending, leasing, or owning crates as a means to reduce post-harvest loss and waste, and on drying practices for nutritious vegetables that will include a nutritional retention study for dry vegetables using various packaging methods. You know, somebody mentioned about how they'll be interested in drying their tomatoes. I think they can get into all these programs. Then we've seen the support for the cold chain, I think you're putting yes. The technical assistance in cold storage. They worked with cold hubs. You know, where that's a pictorial, they do solar cold storage for businesses in the fruit and vegetable markets in Owerri. That's really, he had explained it earlier, and I think that's a very good project because there's a lot of wastage at that level. And they've had 4, I think, technical support this year, and they still have 2 more to go. Then the next would be the standards and regulations, and that's the big issue. Because from the discussions earlier, it's not difficult to observe that we do not really have good standards, regulations, because we're still talking about engaging government. Part of it is there because you know you can't just go straight into the cold chain. You would have handled, packaged, that's your food safety management system would be in place depending on what you're doing, if it's on the farm, your GAP, good agricultural practices and all that. Then it will now be handled correctly, pack houses and all that, observing standards. So we haven't really gone into the cold chain as in having standards and regulations as a country, but we'll get there. So I'll talk about standards and regulations, what we have. So the responsibility for the national food control system is shared between the Ministry of Agriculture, Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, the Federal Ministry of Health, Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, Federal Ministry of Science and Technology, Federal Ministry of Environment, the Standards Organization of Nigeria, National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, Nigerian Agricultural Quarantine Services. Some of these, like the last three, are parastatals in the ministries. Some is in the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, NAFDAC in Ministry of Health, and Agri-Quarantine in the Ministry, well, the parastatal in Ministry of Agri. Where you have these parastatals, you have the ministries concentrating on the policies. Then you have the parastatals implementing those policies. So they are in the field of executing what those policies say. Then the responsibility for official control functions, which is different from the responsibility for the food control system, is shared between national, states, and local government areas and assignees of government, because the government can assign somebody to play any role. Then if it's in the policy or by a circular letter, then they function in that role. Those, the list I have there is not as if it's exhaustive. That's the main, those that can be on the list to develop the cold chain, these are just those whose mandates empowers them to operate in the food control system. Ministry of Agri Federal is responsible for the control of agriculture, which includes, because we're talking agriculture here, that's why I highlighted that, provision of the policy framework, enabling laws and other legislations. They engage with farmers through their agri-extension services, ADPs, and such structures. Then they facilitate provision of agricultural inputs and machinery. Somebody just mentioned how the cold chain issues should be part of what they would help facilitate. They should first have the commitment and they should assist whichever way they're doing with the others. Then implementation of the relevant food safety management systems such as GAP and HACCP, which are all very important before you can even get onto the cold chain system, because you cannot begin to preserve what is not safe or not properly handled. Then the Nigeria Agri-Quarantine Services is responsible for phytosanitary control, which is the inspection of the plants, which is fruits and vegetables, is what we're talking about here today, then plant products and other regulated articles. They also issue the phytosanitary certificates that are required for exports. Then now I want to talk about the national cold chain standards. And I said earlier, there isn't really a document you can call that. And a number of developing countries, as in a number of developing countries, we don't have that document yet, but from discussions you would see that maybe this is the starting point to work towards having it, because it is very important, at least at this point in time, at the stage we are, where we're diversifying through agriculture, we want to earn good money locally and foreign exchange. However, what happens in Nigeria is that where there are no national standards, we apply international best practices and to make sure that safety and quality standards are still met. So it doesn't mean that you can see from discussions here that there's actually cold chain system, no matter how rudimentary it is, and private sector is still part of Nigeria. So, but for the government bodies that oversee all this, they would still make sure that whatever gets to that point is safe. So that's what happens. Whatever cold chain standards that there are, Even if we haven't developed a national one, we use the international standards. And I think this is the time, from all that is happening for us to develop those standards. Then relevant stakeholders, if we should, people have said who they feel, and these are all just suggestions, because in a place like this, can get varied views. So the stakeholders, to my mind, would be to form the committee that will speak to that issue or challenge we're having. The relevant stakeholders will include ministries, departments, and agencies with roles in food safety and quality standards and regulations. Then professional bodies, and I've listed some of them there. The NIFS, Nigeria Institute of Food Science and Technology, Institute of Public Analysis, Animal Science Association, Nutrition Society, because we're talking about safety, food security, nutrition, we're talking about all those. And somebody just said the private sector is not usually fully engaged in some of these things we do. And I think that's correct, because they would give direction to what will be most beneficial to them and everybody. Then you can have private consultants, then refrigerated containers, engineers and related issues, scientific and industrial research organizations, fresh fruit and vegetable wholesalers, marketers of fresh fruit and vegetables, cold chain operators and logistics companies, and farmers group. That's just my thought about those I feel should come together to develop standards. But I now looked at it, and when you have laws, then you have standards that are developed from the laws, then you make regulations based on that. These are legislations that the law will empower you, that you start making to bring it to the people and make it easier. Then you now have guidelines. The guidelines will go to specifics, because the laws will be general, regulations will be broad, but the guidelines will give you step by step. So even when we make the standards for our country, I would recommend we have guidelines too that would be specific. So this is an example of a developed country guideline, cold chain guidelines. It's actually the Australian Cold Chain Guidelines 2017. Food safety is actually the focus or the attention it's receiving is increasing globally. People want safe food wherever they are. There are all sorts of private standards. There are groups that are making sure, because they're consumer driven, the consumer actually dictates the pace. So when you have like the GFS, Global Food Safety Initiative, that now puts in additional certification so that the retailers, the big retailers, actually members, business people, and researchers, and all that. So you find out that the Australian government has reviewed their guidelines. This is a very recent one, 2017, to capture the mood globally. They have 15 sections and 4 appendices. I'll not go through all of them because you see it in the presentation, but it tells you what the cold chain is, implementation and record keeping, the rules, then the never warmer than rule. That's whatever thing you're dealing with shouldn't be warmer than this temperature. Like I said, guidelines are more detailed and it's a step-by-step thing, and on and on. Next slide. Then it tells you about the stock rotation, first expiry, first out. You have to pay attention to that, the rule for doing that. And when things go wrong, what you do, because we're not in a perfect world. Things will always go wrong. That's wrong sometimes. So you just make sure they don't, but when they do, there has to be something in place for you to remedy the situation. There has to be. That's why I have recalls and withdrawals. So the guidelines spells out all that. Down to transportation, the guidelines for that, the distribution vehicles, they are refrigerated vehicles, will tell you things about that. The storage and warehousing, retail outlets, we're beginning to have big retailers, the ShopRites and all that, it will specify. Then even the food service industry, maybe you're serving food or whatever, there are different levels at which food gets to the consumer, and of course consumer education, which is very important. Then they have their appendices and the glossary of terms. Cold chain logistics, Rusty has really told us a lot about that, but I just want to say that the International Trade Administration puts global food industry losses each year at $750 billion, largely due to improper facilities and mistakes in the cold chain logistics. So for the cold chain logistics industry, they have their standards, you know. They define their expectations along the food chain. They include requirements for speed of shipping, because you'll agree if you're doing perishable and you waste too much time, your products will get bad before it gets to the destination. So speed is of essence. Then in the US, because you know I said I'm taking the developed countries examples, those that have things in place. The federal regulators set the baselines, and this will help us when we start as for safety and quality, and that is expected. So the bodies involved are the FDA, the US Customs, because customs is very important in all this when you're doing logistics. And they have to buy into the whole idea, even as we develop our national standards. Because if they don't understand what we're saying here, and you're moving your vegetables in your refrigerated truck, or the way we do it now, and they decide to hold you at some point and waste all your time, because they don't understand that you really have to move whatever perishable food you have quickly, then there's a problem. So here, in that list, I forgot to add that, well, they're not really directly involved with food safety, but when we do the cold chain standards, they should be very much involved. Then the IATA, then their Department of Transportation, and the TSA. Then the regulations they make, whether they cover specific shipping procedures or documentation, are in place to ensure cold chains are the cold chain operators are shipping their products safely, because that's the key word. Everything is done, whatever IT or documentation, you should ship fast and safe. Then the standards don't end with these federal requirements. Instead, proactive shipping companies need to set their own strong quality standards to ensure that their cold chain logistics meet federal standards as well as consumer expectations. Of course, we know poor documentation it's not permissible in this kind of business. So there has to be proper documentation, which is essential in maintaining the standards. And in the US now, the Food Safety Modernization Act that got passed in 2011, they have not fully implemented, because the smaller operators, farmers, they still have an extended period to observe what the Act provides for. But this Act has highlighted the importance of transportation. So the transporters, the drivers really have to be trained to handle whatever thing they're shipping, they're transporting. So there's some additions to what food safety was, some parameters that they've added that has to be met. So if people, like when you start exporting, they need to look at this act to be sure that you're in line, otherwise you may have problems. So we're talking about records and being kept properly. The freight forwarders must complete all required paperwork. Mistakes will lead to costly recalls, which nobody would want. Then there's the management system. They should have a well-planned quality management system. The freight forwarding companies must analyze every step of their cold chain. They must set plans and expectations for how the process should work, and must see that it actually works in practice the way they have put it down. Because we know that any disruption in the cold chain must be marked as a non-conformance, so that you would take action to remedy or corrective action. Then the non-conformance must be analyzed to discover what is the cause. Is it that the employees are not receiving enough training? Is it equipment failure? Whatever thing it is, you need to do all that. That's part of management system. We know we have all the statistics we've been hearing since morning. Fresh fruits and vegetables consist of 45% of the loss or waste. Then reducing post-harvest loss and waste by 10% can reduce prices of fresh fruits and vegetables by 14%, the population at risk of hunger by 11%, and child undernutrition by 4% by 2050. That's what the research findings have. So this is a flow chart of the cold chain process: farm, cooling, refrigerated trucks, storage. You can see everything there. Cool. Temperature is important. For the logistics, it's recommended. There's something I saw. Rusty will know better. It says the Telogis software. It's quite advanced and it gives you a lot of information you need. I just thought I should highlight that for those in that sector to look it up and see how it helps. Well, temperature management is important. So, but we know that different fruits and vegetables require different storage temperatures. In the tropics, most of the fruits require higher temperature than those that are typical of the temperate area. Next slide. So I have this table that shows the range. For apples, asparagus, and all that, 1 to 4 degrees Celsius. For avocado and zucchini and all that, 5 to 9%. 10 degrees Celsius for the subtropical. You see the temperate avocado has a lower temperature. That's fine. So the impact on food safety and quality, public health, price volatility, establishing the facility will improve the efficiency of food supply chains and compliance with food safety and quality standards. It will improve food safety and food security and nutrition. It will reduce health problems and costs associated with the consumption of unsafe food. Reduce price volatility, especially for countries that are import dependent. It will create opportunities for employment and value-added processing of horticultural products. Enable our exports to be competitive and increase economic benefits to farmers and those in related businesses. Then the actions to consider. The constraints in developing countries is that many small-scale farmers and traders are limited in financial means and the know-how or the technology to prevent post-harvest losses. Then they lack the capacity in management of the cold chain and maintaining it. Inadequate infrastructure is an issue, like poor roads, power, water, transportation. Then minimal or lack of application of food quality and safety standards and education and awareness is an issue. Next slide. So the actions to consider will be integration of cold chain development, to my mind, into the agriculture and food policies, the strategies and the action plans as an integral element of improving the efficiency of the food system and reducing food losses and waste. That the strategies for cold chain development should be adapted to specific commodity groups and geographic and socio-economic conditions. Provision of key services by government, such as public infrastructure and legislation, are critical in this, for this issue. Then education, awareness, capacity building, and attitudinal change of operators along the cold chain, because people just don't, they feel it's expensive, or for whatever reason, they're not really applying themselves to applying even the standards they know about. So there has to be a change of attitude. then effective coordination and maintenance of food management of the integrated steps, recognizing that collaboration among the multiple stakeholders involved in the unbroken cold chain of a particular commodity is vital. We have talked about so many people there, and our experience is that so many suggestions, but the coordination and the implementation hasn't been too good. I have some references I looked at the end. Thank you.